Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about a new Netflix movie that you can stream right now through their streaming service. It's called The Electric State. This is a film that's directed by the Russo brothers who worked on Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. For those who want to go all the way back to the early part of their career, they also did the small little comedy with Owen Wilson called You, Me, and Dupree. They've also done some TV stuff like Community and some bunch of other stuff. But most for the most part, they're known for mostly their Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity credits. But in this film, though, you guys, we follow a young girl who's played by Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things fame, and she's trying to find her boy genius brother who's gone missing. They live in this reality where everybody's kind of turned to virtual reality headsets. They kind of live in there all day. They're able to go to work in those. They're able to kind of both relax and go to work at the same time due to this technology. And so her brother goes missing, and it's never really clear why as to why he was going missing, but there is a kind of this messenger bot that basically tracks down Millie Bobby Brown at the beginning of the film. And he basically has a point of origin to where her brother might be throughout this time where he's gone missing. So basically, she goes on this cross country road trip to basically track down her brother. She eventually is she has a crossroads with a character that's played by Chris Pratt, who's kind of the scrap hunter that's looking from stuff from the old world before kind of human and bots kind of had like a hybrid system with each other. Because throughout this movie, basically, there was this war that broke out between robots and humans, where um, robots were taking away our jobs. They were taking away people's rights. There was robot rights that were being taken away. So there was this huge war that broke out. And as a result, the robots kind of went into hiding while the humans kind of went to virtual reality headsets to kind of escape this reality that we were all in. And so basically, like I said, Millie Bobby Brown tracks down the scrap hunter. He agrees to help her track down her brother. And throughout this movie, we're constantly asked, is AI really that good for us? Is virtual reality really that good for us? Is spending so much time in an escape really healthy for us? If it's really not really, unless not willing to let us spend time in the real world as much as we should. Is it taking away from our right to live our lives, to travel, to pursue a real hobby in the real world and stuff like that? So all this stuff is asked over the course of the Electric State, and we also get to find out what exactly happened to her brother, and what exactly is the fate of these virtual reality headsets that everybody is basically asked to be a part of. But overall, guys, I enjoyed the Electric State. I know on Rotten Tomatoes it's not really doing well score wise. I think it has something really brutal, like an 18% or something like that. So I am happy to report that this film is way better than Rotten Tomatoes is telling you it is. It's a film where it has a lot of interesting, thought provoking questions. It asks you, the viewer, yourself, how you feel about AI, how you feel about virtual reality, how you feel about. Should there be a line of humans should be allowed to do this, robots are allowed to do that, but they shouldn't be doing that as much as a human should. And so all this stuff is offered and asked over the course of the Electric State. And overall, I thought it was a very good film overall, even if there is a couple negatives along the way that could prevent it from being a fantastic film per se. But overall, guys, for my positives and negatives of this film, I did like how fun and likable our lead characters are. Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt are really enjoyable here. Anthony Mackie also does the voice of this robot that follows Chris Pratt around. He's a lot of fun. I just enjoyed a lot of these characters. I enjoyed following them around. I enjoyed seeing kind of how their goals were going to be met, how they were going to go about resolving this problem that they were all running into. So for the most part, the film allows us to follow around these characters that are pretty much, for the most part, really likable, really fun, and we really feel invested in this journey that they're on. I also like the film's commentary about AI, about virtual reality, how there should be more control about it. There should come a point where, virtual reality is nice to have, for like an off thing, for a side hobby, for something like if you want to play a video game or something, that's totally fine. But when it becomes your life, when you're reporting to your job through a virtual reality headset, when you're traveling in a virtual reality headset, when you're going to your virtual reality headset instead of doing something with friends and family. I think that's the line that needs to be crossed. I think that's something that the film very specifically is trying to tell us, that virtual reality is a nice thing to have on the side, but it shouldn't become your life. Same with AI. It's nice to have it. It's nice to have a little autocorrect every once in a while in our life, but when it becomes your life, when it's doing your life for you, that's, I think, when the line gets crossed, and that you, the person, should be doing a lot of that work instead of this robot technology doing it for you. And so there's a lot of times where this film asks us that. It has commentary about it, and for the most part, I think it is pretty effective here overall. I also like the visual effects that are on display here. This film unfortunately did cost Netflix about $350 million dollars to make, so this was not a cheap project. This was not a cheap endeavor on the Russo brothers' behalf at all. This is a very expensive film that they had to ask a lot of money for to get made, and I think it paid off. I think if it were me personally, if it was me calling the shots at Netflix, I would not have provided $350 million for this movie to get made. I would have maybe offered no more than 150, no more than 200 million. Yes, it's great that the Avengers Endgame got made through the Russo brothers and they did a terrific job, but and it is one of the highest grossing films of all time, but I wouldn't give them $350 million to make this movie. I just don't understand the business benefits of giving them that. If for me personally, I think this film could have been made for far less than that. So I don't know what exactly was needed to have that warrant that budget for this kind of movie. But for the most part, like I said, talking about what was on display here, what got made, I think they look terrific. I think all the robot characters look great. The environments are very interactive and very huge and gigantic. I like how it really does feel like we're kind of in this other place, in this other time. It really does not feel like we're, seeing Chris Pratt or Millie Bobby Brown rocking around on a green screen. It does look a lot better than that. That you can definitely tell they put their money in the right place as far as getting the visual effects to look as good as they are. Um, and I do like how they did try to incorporate real event stuff and try to make it feel like that things in this reality were happening the same time that ours was. Like whether it's Bill Clinton passing a bill, or the Mr. Peanut character, getting a design change in his commercials and stuff like that. But for the most part, visual effects wise, no complaints at all. Visually, it looks fantastic. You can definitely tell they spent a lot of money making sure that this film looks great. I also like the world building of this film. I do like the idea of, um, characters where when they don't want to use the virtual reality headsets, when they want to go out and about, when they want to do stuff that isn't required by the VR headset laws. There's a lot of interesting things that happen, whether it's the police coming after them, or people looking down upon them and stuff like that. There's a lot of world building in this film that happens that I think is very interesting, and makes you feel invested in what exactly the story's trying to do, and the restrictions and rules that a lot of these characters follow over the course of this film. And overall, too, the whole thing with Millie Bobby Brown and her younger brother, who's the this boy genius character, I think they're bonding because they do show a lot of flashbacks in this film as well. Their sense of bonding, I thought, was very effective. So when something tragic does happen to one or the other of them, we do kind of feel that with them. Their bonding is very effective. It does feel very brother and sister like. You could definitely tell that they were very close, that they didn't really have the parental figures they needed growing up to rely on them, so they kind of had to go to each other for things as they were growing up. And I do like how over the course of this film, we really do get to kind of see the bond of these two characters. But for my negatives of The Electric State, I wouldn't call it a terrific film. I would still call it a good one, though. Some of the story elements do feel really lazy to me. There's just a lot of scenes where when the point of origin is found for this young man that Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt are trying to look for, their sense of travel doesn't make any sense to me. Like there's a scene where Chris Pratt's saying, "Oh, it's thousands of miles away. It'll take us days, if not weeks, to get there and stuff." And literally, they're there in the next scene. So there's just a lot of scenes where it's just really lazy, where there's just a lot of time that passes, where like it legitimately feels like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden, this thing that they claimed that was millions of miles away, they're there in the course of like an hour. And so there's things like that where like the editing and the writing feels really lazy. So I thought that aspect of the story could have been better. There's just certain story elements that feel really lazy here. So I don't know if certain scenes got left on the cutting room floor or if the editing just wasn't up to par the way it should have been. But certain aspects of the story do feel kind of lazy. And overall, too, another thing negative I have with the movie is this movie does copy a lot from the story Ready Player One. For those who remember seeing that, it was a Steven Spielberg film, and it was a big novel as well from Ernest Cline. Um, there's a lot of ideas of, make sure that you're being alive, make sure that you're doing things in the real world. It's fine to have, video games and all this stuff that we can escape to every once in a while, but when that becomes your life, when you're not living your life, that's when it becomes an issue. And I think that message, the Electric State doesn't have as strong of an impact on as the way Ready Player One did. And like I said, there's just a lot of ideas here that do feel very similar to what Ready Player One was trying to do already. Um, it was effective. It was good. It's a good message to have in a film like this. But for the most part, it does kind of feel like it's copying Ready Player One. There's a character played by Stanley Tucci here that's supposed to be the creator of this virtual reality headset. The problem is the film wants us to feel invested in him, but the problem is that he's not very likable. There's just a lot of scenes where he's trying to make a point. He's trying to get people to come work for him to do horrible stuff, but he's just not very likable. His way of persuading you into the way he's thinking that he is, it just isn't very strong. So he just wasn't a very likable character. I really couldn't get behind his mission as a character really either. So I thought it's one of those things where for all these points that they're trying to make about virtual reality, it's hard to get into them because the character that's trying to push us into those thoughts isn't a very likable character to begin with. Another problem I have with the movie too is there's this huge plot line that I won't get into too much detail on because it could be spoiler territory, but I'm going to try to keep this as broad as possible to make my point. There's a scene where everybody's network essentially crashes, and a lot of them have been on this VR headset for a really long time now. And it's one of those things where everybody just kind of seems okay with it. So basically, this thing that they've had for years and years crashes, and then this one person that shows up out of nowhere just tells them that they can't have that anymore. There's just a lot of scenes where you really have to suspend disbelief in order to kind of get what they're trying to do. So the idea of everybody's networks crashing and they're just kind of okay with it based on this what this complete stranger is telling them to do, kind of difficult to get behind when literally nobody knows anything about this character. So there's just scenes like that that are hard to get into where this thing everybody was a part of for years gets taken away out of the blue and they're just expected to be okay with that. But overall, I'm going to give The Electric State an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a really good movie. I think there's tons of great things to enjoy about it. I think it is a lot better than Rotten Tomatoes is giving it credit for. A lot of critics seem to really, really hate this movie on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think it's a much better film than that. But on the negative, so like I said, though, there is a lot of scenes where it does feel a little lazy. It does kind of copy from Ready Player One a little too often than it should. The creator of the VR headset thing isn't very likable, and you kind of get a hard time getting behind his mission. And the idea everybody's network crashing and they're just kind of being okay with that was a little hard to buy into. But overall, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. If you have Netflix, if the film intrigued you at all, if the trailers intrigued you at all, I think it's worth checking out. It's not, the best thing you'll ever see, but I think it's a really good time on Netflix. It's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I recommend seeing it.